I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Catie Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to the 120th episode of Dark and Stormy Book Club. We have a special episode today. We're calling it our cozy episode, where we are each going to highlight a cozy book that we've read. And I'll start. My cozy, which I have to put it out there right now, I'm not a huge fan of cozies. Starting with that, I did like this cozy. I really enjoyed having a palate cleanser, so to speak, from some of the more dark stories that I tend to veer towards. This was called Dead in Dublin, a first in a series. It's the Dublin Driver mystery series by Catie Murphy. Although born and raised in Texas, Megan Malone chooses to settle in her ancestral home of Ireland after retiring from the military. As a driver for Leprechaun Limousine Service in Dublin, she chauffeurs many well-heeled tourists to and fro in the surrounding area. As such, she is on hand to witness her repeat client, Elizabeth Darr, collapsed at the foot of the famous statue of Molly Malone. No relation. Despite the best efforts of Liz's husband, Simon, who was a doctor, and Megan, a former combat medic, Liz dies outside Canaan's at St. Andrews, the restaurant where she and her husband had just finished a meal. Besides feeling a connection to the Darrs, Megan is also trying to find out whether Liz, a famous food critic and blogger, died from eating a meal at her friend Fionnuala Canaan's restaurant, which would devastate her friend and the restaurant. Once it is determined that Liz's death was foul play, Megan sets out on a quest to find out who killed Liz Darr. Dead in Dublin combines a cast of likable characters with a pleasantly twisty plot and witty dialogue. As a limo driver, Megan has the opportunity to meet a myriad variety of people and the flexibility to do her own investigating, chasing down all the red herrings. She's not a young ingenue, but has worldly experience, which makes for a believable protagonist. Oh, and best of all, she has not, underline not, adopted a Jack Russell mama and 2 newborn puppies. But we'll see about that. I can see where this is heading. As an American, Megan has had to learn Irish colloquialisms, and the text contains a number of Irishisms which add flavor and atmosphere to the narrative. And I really enjoyed that, I have to say, and I'm going to give you an example of that. Megan is speaking with an Irish person who says, "Nah, you're one, nah, only you're one, W-A-N, she'd been hanging out with." Later on in the paragraph, she explains that a wan in Irish parlance generally meant a woman. Your man and your wan had, as Megan suspected, some kind of basis in the same kind of institutional sexism in the Irish language that begot the question, was it a boy or a child? I found things like that very interesting, and maybe that's just me. And she also included a very short pronunciation guide in the beginning, which I also found helpful, which is why I could pronounce Fionnuala. As the first in the Dublin Driver mysteries, Dead in Dublin is a promising start, and I look forward to the next installment. As C.E. Murphy, Catie Murphy has written numerous award-winning fantasy and sci-fi novels. When her editor asked if she had any ideas for a cozy murder mystery, Catie replied, "Boy, howdy do I." When I read that, I fell in love with Catie. Thus, the Dublin Driver mystery series was born. Catie also writes action-adventure romances as Kate Dermody. Born and raised in Alaska, she now lives with her family in her ancestral homeland of Ireland. Her website is mizkit.com. That's MIZKIT.com. And Dead in Dublin was published in January of this year by Kensington Publishing. Ta-da!
Well, mine is called Death Becomes Her, and that B is BEE. It's the first in the Oregon Honeycomb mystery series. Together with her Havana brown cat, Everett, Wren Johnson, who settled in Oregon to be near her Aunt Eloise, lives above the shop she owns, Let It Be, which specializes in all things honeybee. During one of the beach walks Everett enjoys on his leash, he alerts Wren to a dead body. Handsome beat cop Jim Hampton arrives on the scene to find her clutching a paper that was in the dead woman's hand. A label from one of Wren's lip balms. The woman is Agnes Snow, the wife of ex-mayor Bernie Snow, and a fierce crafting rival of Aunt Eloise. Wren becomes a person of interest when the police discover poison in the lip balm. Lawyer Matt Hansen takes her case pro bono, warns her not to talk to the police in his absence. So instead she talks to everyone else. Although she must watch as her reputation in town is torn to shreds. She still has friends who believe in her, from her sales manager Portia to 911 operator Josie, and of course Aunt Eloise. Despite repeat warnings from Hampton, the three of them chat up the locals, hoping to provoke gossip and elicit possible motives for killing Agnes and framing Wren. They wonder if the cash deposit Agnes was making into her bank account could be blackmail payments that would provide a good motive for murder. When Everett is apparently catnapped, Wren, desperate to find him, ignores warnings that would keep her out of trouble. It's a delightful read. I, like Catie, tend to go on the more darker side with books. With today's environment, boy, it was a nice reprieve to just read something lighthearted. But there was a good mystery in there, too. I have to say, it kept me going. Like yours also, it was filled with red herrings. This story is about Wren, and Wren owns a shop named Let It Be, B-E-E. It sells everything honey and bee related.
Really?
Yes. I tell you, her descriptions of the store made me want to go. Even though it's a fictional store, it has a window inside the store that is a working honeybee colony that you can watch the bees work the hive. And it was a big draw for people to come into the store. But she sold beeswax candles, lip balm, shampoos, whatever you name it. It had something to do with bees. She sold it. She ran this store with the help of her Aunt Eloise, and then she has a woman working for her named Portia. But the biggest character in the book is Everett, her cat. And her cat plays a huge part in this story. Everett talks, but he doesn't talk human. He talks cat talk, and he's a very noisy talker. He gets into a lot of mischief and causes some problems. And the first mischief he gets in is he's the one that discovers the body on the beach. They are going for their daily walk. I thought that was very different because I don't know too many people that walk cats. Maybe I just don't hang in the right circles.
I had 4 cats at one time. I didn't walk any of them.
Well, I remember being a child and trying to walk my cat, Samson, and he laid on the ground and wanted me to drag him. So that's my only experience with walking cats. And he even ran into a conundrum because Everett comes up missing. She's trying to locate him and she hears him meowing in a shed and goes in the shed and gets trapped in the shed. Everett gets out, but she's still trapped in the shed. But this book was a great, fun read. It had quite a few suspects. For these suspects, you had 2 questions you had to ask yourself. Who was committing the murders, but also, is that same person the one that's trying to set Wren up to make it look like she committed the murders? because she had some enemies, and her Aunt Eloise also had enemies.
Wow, I didn't know beekeepers.
Yeah, well, it wasn't beekeepers, it was other shop owners. And there was a woman who owned a candle shop who was not happy with Wren. But there is a love interest. Well, I shouldn't say that. You can tell it's a budding. Since this is the first in a series, he's a cop. You know that he's going to probably eventually be the love interest of Wren.
Mine has one too, by the way. And coincidentally, it's also a cop.
It usually is. The characters were very fleshed out as far as you got to know all about Wren and why she's where she is. And her Aunt Eloise is the typical funny, willing to jump in and help, but also get into mischief. The thing I always find interesting about cozies is people in cozies tend to put themselves in danger in situations that normal people would just not. They break into a house. I think they went through the doggy door and said they were chasing the cat because they were trying to gather clues. And that's just not something you see every day, but it's enjoyable and it's fun.
Well, actually, having the cat as an excuse is actually a step up from some of the crazy excuses that other cozies come up with.
One of the most enjoyable things about the book for me was I've always been very interested in the conservatory of bees and saving their existence. She talks about that in this book. You learned a few things, and she had a few recipes thrown in here and there. It was very, very enjoyable, and believe me, I've read some that I wanted to throw across the room, and this is definitely a very good cozy. So I definitely recommend it. This book is by Nancy Coco, who is also, that's a pseudonym, her real name is Nancy J. Para. She also writes under Nancy Hamilton, and she's the author of over 30 books, which include the Oregon Honeycomb Mystery Series by Kensington, the Candy Coated Mystery Series also by Kensington, the Kensington Palace Mystery Series by Crooked Lane Books, the Gluten-Free Baker's Treat Mystery Series by Berkeley Prime Crime, the Wine Country Tour Mysteries by Crooked Lane, and last but not least, the Perfect Proposal Mysteries by Berkeley Prime Time. Whew, she's a busy lady.
Yes, she is.
Nancy is a member of the Sisters in Crime and writes for the Killer Character blog on the 8th of every month. This mystery is a Barnes & Noble exclusive until the end of the year, so if you're interested in reading Death Becomes Her, you will have to purchase that at Barnes & Noble. Her website is nancyjcoco, that's COCO.com.
Sounds good. And now we're going to have a classic cozy book report by Anne.
The book I have is one of my favorite authors was Anne George, and she wrote a wonderful series called The Southern Sisters. This book, Murder Carries a Torch, is number 7. The series featured Patricia Ann Hallowell and her sister Mary Alice. Patricia Ann is a very tiny little petite woman. She is in her late 50s. Her nickname is Mouse. And her sister, Mary Alice, who has been married, I believe, 4 times. She is a very large woman. She calls herself Empress-sized. She is very flamboyant. She always goes for the latest fashion. She is just a force to be reckoned with. Well, they all live in this small town in Alabama. They get into all kinds of weird situations. One of the things I love about this series is the nicknames that they come up with their characters. Mary Alice is called Sister. Patricia Ann, as I said, is called Mouse. She is married to Fred. Mary Alice is currently not married, but she's looking. Any man in pants is a good target. As this episode starts, the girls are just returning from a visit to Vienna, Austria, where Patricia Ann's daughter, who has just married, has gone to live for several months. They get a message from their cousin, Pukey Lukey. Apparently, Luke has grown out of his nickname. They never forget in this book. If you were called Pukey Lukey because you got car sick. As a child, you kept that name throughout your life. Luke is very unhappy. His wife has disappeared. She has left him and gone off with the man who was painting their house. His name was Holden Crawford, shades of John Steinbeck. They find the address for Mr. Crawford. They head to Chandler Mountain. Well, they find out that Mr. Crawford was the minister as well as a house painter. Luke goes in to look for his wife